Before Athens, before Socrates, before the marble columns and Golden Age debates, there was another city. A place almost erased from memory. A city where the first sparks of human reasoning were struck long before the world knew the word philosophy. And yet, almost no one remembers its name. Imagine walking through a ruined landscape where the wind whistles through broken pillars, where the earth hides fragments of forgotten teachings, where an entire civilization seems to have been silenced. This was the place where the first humans dared to ask the forbidden questions. What is real? What is the universe made of? Why are we here? Centuries later, others would claim these ideas sprang from Athens, but the truth, buried in the shadows of ancient history, points somewhere else. A city older, stranger, more mysterious. A city once known as the cradle of wisdom, now little more than dust beneath the soil of Western Anatolia. The Greeks called it Miletus. But before Miletus became a name whispered in scrolls, it was something far more dangerous. A hub of thinkers who dared to rebel against the gods themselves. Because unlike neighboring cultures who feared divine wrath, the first philosophers of this forgotten city believed the world could be explained not by myth, but by observation, reason, and evidence. And that idea, radical, almost treasonous, changed everything. Picture 6th century BCE Miletus, a bustling port, ships from Egypt and Lydia unloading strange goods and stranger ideas. Streets filled with traders speaking in foreign tongues. Night markets glowing with lanterns. And in a small courtyard near the center of the city, a man sits alone, staring into a bowl of water like it contains the secrets of the universe. His name was Thales. Later generations would call him the first philosopher, the man who predicted solar eclipses, who taught that everything, trees, rivers, stars, even the soul, came from a single underlying substance. But in his time, he was simply the odd man who dared to question the gods. And he wasn't alone. Whispers in Miletus tell of a small group, almost a secret society, who met in hidden rooms behind the marketplace. Their mission was to understand the cosmos without invoking any deity. They studied storms, watched shadows move across sundials, dissected the behavior of water, fire, earth, and air. Each night, the citizens wondered whether these strange men were geniuses or heretics. Because asking questions about the nature of reality was dangerous. It threatened the old stories, the old power structures. Priests warned that such curiosity would bring disaster. Mothers told their children to avoid the thinkers gathering near the harbor. Even the city's rulers watched them with growing suspicion. But the thinkers of Miletus kept pushing. What they discovered would form the foundation of philosophy, science, and rational thought. But long before their ideas reached Athens, before Plato or Aristotle shaped the world, the first cracks in mythic thinking spread from this forgotten city. Still, with every breakthrough came a threat. Miletus stood at the crossroads of empires, Lydia, Persia, and later the Greeks, each eager to control not just land, but knowledge. And knowledge, as the thinkers of this city quickly learned, had a price. Because in the darkness of a Maltean night, as torches flickered between stone alleys, a rumor began to spread. Someone powerful wanted the thinkers silenced. And as Thales stood at the edge of the harbor, watching the moon glimmer on the water, he sensed it too. The closer they came to uncovering the nature of reality itself, the more dangerous their pursuit became. The forgotten city was waking enemies, some human, some ideological, who would stop at nothing to preserve the old ways. What happened next would determine not just the fate of Miletus, but the birth of philosophy itself. Miletus is booming, merchants shouting, ships docking, spices and stories from Egypt, Babylon, Lydia, and beyond pouring into the streets. But beneath the noise, something is happening quietly, almost invisibly. A few strange men, dangerous men, according to the old priests, begin whispering ideas that could unravel the very fabric of ancient religion. They weren't warriors. They weren't kings. They weren't prophets. They were questioners. And the world had never seen anything like them. Thales walked through the bustling port with a peculiar habit. He stared not at the temples, not at the altars, not at the sky, but at water. To everyone else, water was just water. To Thales, it was a clue. He began with a question no one had dared ask. What if the universe is not ruled by gods, but by principles? This was more than philosophy. This was heresy. Thales proposed something outrageous. Everything, rocks, trees, the sky, comes from one underlying substance. Water. Not Zeus. Not Poseidon. Not divine whims. A single, natural, understandable element. It was the first known attempt in human history to explain the world without myth. No rituals. No omens. Just observation and logic. This is the true revolution born in Miletus. The idea that the world makes sense, and humans can understand it. Thales didn't stay alone for long. His students, fascinated and disturbed by what he was proposing, gathered around him in a city courtyard that would later be called the place of the first thinkers. Here, the first philosophical debates in recorded history erupted. If Thales was the rebel, Anaximander was the architect. He took Thales' idea and pushed it further, far beyond anything the ancient world had ever imagined. Where did everything come from? Surely not one thing like water. Anaximander proposed something terrifyingly abstract, the boundless, an infinite, unseen source of all reality. It wasn't a god. It wasn't matter. It was the earliest concept of the universe itself. Then he did something even bolder. He drew the world. Literally. Anaximander created the first map in Western history, and possibly the first attempt to represent the entire inhabited world in a single image. Think about that. Before him, people only knew their own villages, their coastlines, their myths. He dared to imagine the whole earth. In a world ruled by kings and priests, Miletus produced a new kind of hero, the philosopher, a person armed not with weapons, but with questions. The rulers of neighboring lands began to take notice. Who were these men who measured the heavens, predicted eclipses, mapped the earth, questioned the gods, and claimed the universe obeyed laws? They were not wise men in the magical sense. They were something completely new. Thinkers who believed the human mind could uncover secrets previously reserved for the divine. This is the true beginning of Western philosophy. Not in Athens, not with Socrates, but here, in this now-forgotten city, where every idea burned like a spark about to ignite civilization. To understand why Miletus became the birthplace of philosophy, we must look beyond its thinkers and into the structure of the city itself. Because Miletus wasn't just a place where ideas were spoken. It was a place where ideas were allowed to survive. This city had something most ancient societies never dared permit. A culture where questioning wasn't punished, it was celebrated. And that changed everything. While the rest of the world lived under strict priesthoods and monarchs who controlled knowledge, Miletus stumbled, almost accidentally, into a perfect storm that made philosophical thinking not just possible, but inevitable. Let's break down the forces that collided to create history's first mind laboratory. Every day, ships from Egypt, Babylon, Phoenicia, and Lydia unloaded not just goods, but ideas. Merchants brought stories of foreign gods, foreign customs, foreign mathematics, foreign astronomy. In most cities, such diversity was feared. In Miletus, it was fuel. The more contradictions people heard, the more they asked, if every nation claims a different truth, then what is the actual truth? No single mythology could dominate. No priesthood could lock ideas down. Knowledge circulated freely, and from conflict came clarity. This part is critical. In Egypt, priests controlled cosmology. In Babylon, priests controlled astronomy. In Persia, priests controlled morality. But Miletus? Its religion was fragmented, local, and weak. There was no centralized authority to punish speculation. This allowed something extremely rare in the ancient world, safe intellectual rebellion. A thinker in Egypt could be silenced. A thinker in Babylon could be imprisoned. A thinker in Miletus could argue, and at worst, be called eccentric. Freedom of thought wasn't a policy. It was an accident of politics. And it created the prototype for what we today call academic freedom. Money matters. Even for philosophy. Trade turned the city into a superpower of wealth. And wealth did two important things. It reduced the daily survival pressure on citizens. People had time to think. It attracted ambitious minds from everywhere. If you wanted opportunity, you came to Miletus. This concentration of talent, merchants, scientists, travelers, engineers, formed the earliest intellectual class. Not by social design, but by economic gravity. Imagine this scene. A crowd gathers around Anaximander as he unveils his revolutionary cosmic diagram. Children point at the drawing. Merchants raise eyebrows. Skeptics scoff. Sailors argue about whether the ocean really circles the Earth. No one had ever seen a map of the world before. This wasn't a classroom moment. It was a public shockwave. Philosophy wasn't hidden in temple chambers. It was performed in the marketplace like theater. These thinkers weren't reclusive scholars. They were public intellectuals, centuries before Athens even knew what that meant. This is the moment everything changed. When Thales famously predicted a solar eclipse, something unprecedented happened in human consciousness. For the first time in recorded history, a natural event was explained without gods. The sun didn't darken because Apollo grew angry. It darkened because geometry and astronomy said it would. Imagine what that did to people watching it unfold exactly as one man predicted. It shattered superstition. It elevated reason. It proved that the universe was not a chaotic battleground of divine emotions, but a system of laws. Once humans witnessed one law, they began searching for more. This shift, from myth to mechanism, is the birth of science. And it started here, in this city, this forgotten city. By the time Thales, Anaximander, and Anaximenes were teaching, Miletus had become something new, a prototype of the modern university, a living blueprint for the Enlightenment, an ancient Silicon Valley of thought. The world didn't know it yet, but a revolution had begun, a revolution that would spread to Athens, to Plato, to Aristotle, to Rome, to the Renaissance, and finally into the scientific world we inhabit today. And it all started in a coastal trading city most people have never heard of. For nearly a century, Miletus had been a beacon of reason, a city where the cosmos was questioned, where nature was decoded, where gods were dethroned by logic. But every flame draws shadows, and the brighter the flame, the darker the shadows become. Because the world outside Miletus was changing, power was shifting, and somewhere far beyond the tranquil Ionian Sea, a storm was moving straight toward the forgotten cradle of philosophy. The first warning didn't come from a philosopher. It came from a merchant. A battered ship limped into the harbor. The crew whispered of a new force rising in Persia, a force swallowing cities like a desert tide. But the Milesians didn't fear it. Why would they? They had Thales' eclipse prediction, Anaximander's map of the world, Anaximenes' theories of the air. They had tamed the unknown with knowledge. Yet knowledge can't stop an empire. Miletus believed in ideas, not armies. Its walls were old. Its defenses weak. Its political alliances unstable. Philosophy had made the city wise, but also naive. While their neighbors prepared for war, the Milesians continued debating, what is the principle of all things? Is the earth suspended in nothing? Is air divine? Beautiful questions, but useless against soldiers. By 546 BCE, Persia had stretched across Asia Minor. One by one, cities fell. But Miletus, wealthy, influential, confident, negotiated special terms. They believed their intellect could outmaneuver conquest. And for a while it worked. Persian rule was distant. Taxes were manageable. Daily life continued. The city remained a hub of thinkers. But this peace was an illusion, a thin shell over a rising fire. Because in 499 BCE, the Milesians made a decision that would destroy everything. A charismatic statesman named Aristagoras urged Miletus to rebel. He promised glory, freedom, a return to greatness. The philosophers warned him. Some claimed the rebellion was doomed. Others argued Persia was too vast, too organized. But Aristagoras didn't listen to thinkers. He listened to pride. And so Miletus sparked the Ionian Revolt, pulling the entire region into a war they couldn't win. For the first time in its history, Miletus chose violence over reason. And Persia answered. In 494 BCE, The Persian army and navy surrounded Miletus. By land and sea, the cradle of philosophy was sealed shut. Eyewitnesses later wrote that the Persian assault was swift, methodical, merciless. Homes burned. The harbor choked with smoke. Streets ran red. Libraries were destroyed. Temples were looted. Survivors were captured and shipped east, scattered across the Persian Empire like lost seeds. Miletus, once the brightest mind of the ancient world, was silent, completely silent. Her philosophers dead or exiled. Her schools gone. Her world-changing ideas buried beneath ash and rubble. This wasn't just the fall of a city. It was the assassination of an intellectual revolution. When news of the destruction reached Athens, the city went into collective mourning. It's said that when the tragedian Phrynichus wrote a play about the fall of Miletus, the Athenian audience cried so intensely that the government fined him 1,000 drachmas for causing too much public sorrow. Because Athenians knew the truth, without Miletus, there would be no Athens, no Socrates, no Plato, no Aristotle, no Western philosophy. The birthplace of thought had been wiped off the map. But here's the twist. Miletus may have died, but its ideas did not. They escaped. They traveled. They transformed everything they touched. Though Miletus lay in ruins, its ideas refused to die. The city's philosophers, exiled or fleeing before the Persian assault, carried fragments of knowledge across the ancient world. Maps, theories of the heavens, methods of reasoning, and debates about the nature of reality traveled by sea and by foot, finding fertile ground in other cities, most famously Athens. Imagine a young Socrates walking through the Athenian agora, listening to debates about the nature of virtue and the structure of the cosmos. He may have never known Miletus firsthand, but the echoes of Thales, Anaximander, and Anaximenes were woven into the very air. The principle that the universe could be understood, the idea that natural laws, not gods, governed the world, the audacity to question everything. Miletus had sown seeds that would sprout centuries later, influencing Plato, Aristotle, and eventually every corner of Western thought. Without this forgotten city, philosophy as we know it may never have existed. The true tragedy and the true brilliance of Miletus is paradoxical. It was destroyed physically, yet preserved intellectually. The city itself vanished from memory, obscured by empires and time. Its ruins were buried under soil, looted, and forgotten. But its ideas spread like invisible rivers, shaping minds and civilizations far beyond the Ionian coast. Miletus taught humanity something revolutionary. Thought itself can survive destruction. Questions outlive temples. Ideas are immortal. Even the Persian conquerors, unaware of what they had destroyed, had ensured that the intellectual revolution of Miletus would endure. By attempting to erase knowledge, they had inadvertently dispersed it. Today, archaeologists dig beneath the sands of modern Turkey, uncovering fragments of walls, inscriptions, and artifacts. Each discovery whispers the story of a city that dared to think differently. A city where the first humans systematically asked, why do we exist? What is the nature of reality? Can we understand the universe without appealing to the divine? Miletus, though forgotten as a city, remains alive in every question we ask, every theory we propose, and every pursuit of knowledge that challenges tradition. The story of Miletus is more than history. It is a reminder. Progress begins in quiet rebellion, in curiosity, in the courage to ask questions others fear. Civilizations can destroy cities. Empires can obliterate monuments. But the mind, once awakened, cannot be erased. So, when you ponder the cosmos, debate ethics, or challenge convention, remember this. You are walking in the footsteps of a city that once dared to question everything, and in doing so, gave the world a legacy that even time could not bury. Miletus is gone, but philosophy lives, and in every thinker, past and present, its spirit endures.